Welcome to the University of Missouri's Teaching for Learning Center's AI Critical Literacy podcast. This episode, episode 10, is the Fool Me Once episode. You're like, that's a strange name. Like, it's going to make sense. I hope it's going to make sense. My name is Jared Schroeder. That's who you can blame for this podcast. I'm an associate professor at the Missouri School of Journalism, and I'm also a AI teaching fellow for the Teaching for Learning Center. I hope you enjoy this episode. I was thinking the other day about a person I dated in high school. It's been a while since I've been in high school. We didn't have cell phones or any kind of mobile technology. And so this was someone that we dated for a fair amount of time, several months maybe. That's a long time in high school. And then we stopped for whatever reason. There's no need to get into why. This isn't that kind of podcast. Let's not be all salacious about this. But we stopped dating. And then after, 6 months or so, maybe a summer, I thought, maybe we should start dating again. And I started to try to pursue maybe re-engaging in dating with this person. And I remember walking out of high school one day, walking through all the hundreds of cars in the high school parking lot, maybe thinking about how I was about to go to work at my job at Little Caesars, where I made $4.25 an hour, I think, or at my job at the newspaper. And underneath my windshield wiper of my 1988 Toyota Celica that was scratched in a few places because driving is hard when you're 16 especially, underneath the windshield wiper blade was a note. We did a lot of windshield wiper blade notes back then. I guess with texting might have ruined that, but it was kind of fun. What's under my windshield wiper blade? Someone's left me a message, right? I remember opening it up and it just simply said that she did not want to date with me again or date me again. She said, "Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me." That was the quote. And I've forgotten a lot of things about high school. I've never forgotten that quote, right? Basically the idea that, okay, the first time you fooled, I don't know what I fooled her about, and maybe that's a whole other thing. Again, I don't want to get off track. But the whole idea that, okay, the first mistake, okay, fair enough. That's on you. The first time you fooled me, that's on you. But the second time that you fool me, that's on me. It's on me not to get fooled like that again. Should we unpack the emotional feelings that come from a note like that? No, that's not that. Again, this is not that kind of podcast. What I want to do is connect that shame on me feeling to AI and what we need to do with AI and assessment in our classes. This whole podcast season is really about assessment. And, we're reading The Opposite of Cheating by Trisha Bertram Gallant and David Redinger, and we're thinking a lot, and I'm thinking real time, I'm also thinking about this for my classes. How should we be reevaluating how we assess student work and how student learning in this AI era that we're in? And so I feel like it's time to start thinking, the students might have fooled me once, and maybe that's on them. But if they fool me again, if their use of AI on assessments aids them in skirting the learning process, if they that use it on the tests or the quizzes or whatever, and that's not what the instructor found, if that stops them from learning or engaging with the learning objectives for that course, and I'm not upset with the students, because if they fool me again, it's on me, right? We need to be, I would suggest, adjusting our classes to fit a changed environment. And so this episode, episode 10 overall, is focusing on chapter 4 of The Opposite of Cheating book, which is focused on designing assessments for integrity. And so my guest this week, I'm still thinking about whether or not I should tell a breakup story from high school in my professional podcast. My guest this week is Christy Goldsmith, who is the Associate Director of the Campus Writing Program. And she's also teaches in the College of Education. So this is someone who knows, and she's also on the AI task force with me. More specifically, she was in the pedagogy working group of the AI task force. And so another member of our campus community who has a lot of insight and expertise on how to change or think about our assessments. And really the conversation that follows is very much a conversation that I hope that you find useful and enlightening. At no point during this conversation are we telling anybody how to teach their classes, but I hope what we're doing is informing this community on how they can think about or adjust or keep doing things in their classes. So I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Here's my conversation with Christy.
Hi, my name is Christy Goldsmith. I wear two hats here at Mizzou. I am, first of all, the Associate Director of the Campus Writing Program, which is a program that supports teaching with writing across campus. I get to work with faculty here on their writing assignments, their activities in class, their writing assessments. And then 40% of my job is in the College of Education and Human Development, where I'm an assistant teaching professor of English education. So my main role there is thinking about literacy in sort of the secondary spaces, preparing future secondary teachers. So I think about literacy and writing across the board. Much of my research in teacher education is on effective ways to teach writing. I've been doing this for a long time. Actually, I realize this is my 20th first day of class, which does not feel possible. And so throughout those 20 years, I've been thinking a lot about like, what is the best, most authentic way to incorporate writing in our classes? So my first experience with AI was sort of a little bit of a life runner in fall 2022 when ChatGPT came out. Because we started getting a cascade of emails, both from my colleagues in the secondary world, like, have you heard of this thing? And our colleagues here at Mizzou, like, this new ChatGPT thing seems like it might be the end of WI courses. That's what we thought, right? There was a famous Atlantic article written by a guy named Daniel Herman, who wrote the article's title was like the end of high school English. And I'm like, I'm in the job of preparing high school English teachers, so this seems like a challenge. So it was a little bit of a panic moment. And, and since then we've sort of worked our way around it, but it feels like it was like a break in what I know about teaching writing.
I think that's been the most common starting point, is that moment in the fall 2022 when everything sort of changed. But we're not done changing, right? It's still a moving target. And I wanted to ask you the follow-up question of how AI has changed the way you teach and the way that you train other teachers to teach.
I think a lot about this. And this question is interesting because I wonder if most people have the same answer, which is like hasn't changed much about how I teach. I teach media literacy. The main course I teach every fall is methods of teaching media literacy students. And so I've been thinking a long time about what that means. Actually, when I inherited that class from one of my colleagues who was wonderful, it was kind of like a 90s version of media literacy. And so every year I'm like updating it, to whatever the new version of media literacy is. So I think I've always been thinking about writing as an expansive practice, as multimodal, as multi-genre, as something beyond like the written typical term paper. So for my own practice, I don't think it's really changed the way I teach writing at all. I think it's made me think harder about what it means to be authentic, which is what we'll talk about today, right? Like, what does that mean in the age of ChatGPT? But it has really impacted the way that I'm working with faculty in that, faculty, especially in disciplines. I'm in education, which we often joke is like a discipline without a discipline because we're learning how to teach, right? It's not like we're testing you on different types of, science applications. We're not producing people that are going to have the journalistic knowledge you have. So it's more of like a metacognitive discipline. So I'm lucky in that I don't give many tests. I don't give many term papers, but a lot of disciplines do. And so I've been trying to help folks think about like ways to either make their writing AI resistant or AI infused based on their own values. So it's a lot of conversations about values. It took me a long time to get there, but that's what I'm trying to say here.
Well, I mean, I think we're all taking a long time. Like, we're all trying to figure it out. I think, like I've said over and over, especially this season of the podcast, that we're focusing on assessment so much this season, and it's the season I'm in. Like, this is where I am in my AI journey. I'm whatever the stages of grief are. It's like I'm putting them onto AI, and I'm at the moment where I'm trying to figure out how to assess my class. And I think we're in different places. I mean, neither of us teaches science or engineering. I don't do science. I don't count things well. I don't want to. I'm so glad somebody else does. But I have huge lecture classes where I have to do assessment, and I'm guessing the classes you engage with tend to be a little smaller. So we do represent some differences there. One thing I wanted to, so the audience, the people listening generally have not read the chapter. They haven't done the reading, just like my class. And so what stood out to you? Like we've talked about, I've sent you ahead some notes, but like, what really stood out to you about this chapter?
It's always interesting when I pick up a pedagogical book because either it's brand new to me or I kind of know most of what they're talking about. In this book, I did not know the authors. This is a weird part about my work. I do so much reading and teaching in the secondary world that I don't often know the post-secondary authors talking about this stuff. So I was glad that you sent it to me. But when I got to their section where they're citing Grant Wiggins, who was sort of the guy who started thinking about authentic writing, it made me think about Wiggins and McTighe, who are the backward design people, who are the people that came up with what essential questions are. And that's like the entire framework through which I teach my classes. So essential questions are those big questions that go beyond the classroom, that speak to like the enduring knowledge we want students to know when they're off of our campus in 10 years from now, right? Like when they're in the world that we are preparing them for. And so in many ways, this book felt really familiar. I really liked their suggestions. And I also thought that a lot of their suggestions that we'll talk about are in line with what we're already doing here at the campus writing program and supporting WI faculty. So it was like a warm sweater. It felt very familiar, and I really liked what they're saying.
I'm glad. I mean, I guess the journalist in me, I'm always rated to question the readings. I mean, they're doing a nice job, of course, but it doesn't mean that we can't individually question. So like I was reading this chapter and they listed really early on that there's 2 reasons why students cheat. And they said the students either don't agree with the value of the assignment or they are afraid of failure. And I thought that that was an eyebrow raise in the chapter. Because like surely there's more reasons why students cheat than that. So did you eyebrow raise it all there? Did you have other reasons that you think are worth adding?
I'm curious, like what your other reasons would be. Have you thought about that before I tell you what I thought about it?
Well, I could. Well, first of all, earlier in the book, backwards spoiler alert. Earlier in the book, they had a much more complete list that was really pretty darn good. One of the lists of questions or one of the reasons they posted earlier in the book was students don't understand what cheating is. They don't know if they're cheating or not. I thought I really valued that as I was building my class for this school year and this semester. Students are worried about the stakes of the assignment, and so it's more of a stakes decision. And I guess you could say that you could boil these down, the other reasons that they didn't list, to these 2 reasons. Students don't believe they can do it. I'm trying to remember what they did list here.
Yeah, they don't see value in the assignment, or they're afraid of failure.
They don't believe that they can do it. Like I thought about that a lot when I was getting ready for my class this semester. Like, do students cheat because they don't think they can do it? So anyway, I thought there were some, and I thought there could be other answers that I just didn't think of because I'm not in the same research area as these folks are.
Yeah, that's interesting. I like the point they brought about earlier. They don't know what cheating is, because we talk a lot about that. Like as students in our classes at the university are learning the discipline, they're going to make dumb mistakes because they're like sort of bumbling their way through. Much like you mentioned as we started, they can't figure out where they're going when they need help figuring out where their classrooms are the first week of the semester, So we've seen that for a long time. Like they'll poorly paraphrase because they're trying to learn what the words actually mean, So I think that's true. I'm often thinking about Sid Dobrin. He is a professor of English at University of Florida or Central Florida. I'm not quite sure, somewhere in Florida. But he thinks a lot about why students cheat. And his 2 reasons are a lack of time management and a lack of investment. Mm-hmm. So the investment thing was like an overlap here, but I think that time management thing is actually a bigger deal because our students are overscheduled. Like the world we live in, we're all overscheduled. The thing ChatGPT and other generative AI programs do is they have this sense of efficiency, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're overscheduled and they make things seem efficient, it feels to me a different type of cheating than like bumbling our way through learning a new thing and accidentally plagiarizing that way, So I think that's where it's like a different AI moment.
So like along the same lines, how has AI, like since AI has become so widely available, how has it changed the way that you work with academic misconduct questions?
Yeah, this is a problem, and it hinges on, I think, what you noted earlier. Like you teach in large lecture halls, but you're probably very excited to know like a handful of students in that room, like to be able to make an intimate connection. That's just not the way that it works. I teach very small classes. So, everything comes back, and learning to teach, everything comes back to classroom community for me. And so I try really hard in my in-person and online classes to like cultivate a community where I'm like, hey, we all screw up. I mean, I screw up 100 times a day. You're going to see it like in the middle of class. I will mess up, And so often it's just a tough conversation for me. If I see something that a student has perhaps used AI on, I'll be like, I know your voice to be this. And then I read this paragraph and it doesn't fit. Like what happened here? And very often they'll say, "Oh, I tried to paraphrase and I messed up. Like that's from a source." Or, "Yeah, you're right. I used AI. I just ran out of time." It's almost always I ran out of time. And then we'll have a conversation. It's a learning moment. We move our way through. But that's because I teach classes of 25 or 30 at the most. Like, and I read a lot of their writing. When I work with WI faculty, it's tougher. I do know that some faculty have had success in thinking about like, if the sources are made up, that's an easy cut and dry thing. Like if the sources were clearly hallucinated by an AI tool, then that's one conversation. But if not, it makes it a really hard conversation, and students might not fess up if they don't know you because, you're in a lecture hall of 300. So I've been trying to help faculty think about assessment on the front end. Like, how do you know AI is appearing in the writing? And figuring out how you could sort of like put roadblocks in early on. So for me, it's because the voice shifts. So every one of my assessment pieces now has it has your own unique teacherly voice. That's what I say, like over and over again, your own unique teacherly voice. And then I model that voice and all of the silly things that I give them. And we talk about what that voice means. And then when there's a paragraph that sounds like a robot, we can be like, that's not your unique teacherly voice. Let's talk about why. But I also recognize I teach in, an English adjacent discipline. So there's room for that. So figuring out how to sort of give little bits of that writing instruction alongside the more dense content in the sciences and engineering classes is the challenge.
And it sounds like I was going to ask you about how you, like the book said, you have to, if you're going to include AI in an assignment, you have to include it in the assessment in the lesson. And so has that, I that was another eyebrow raise for me. How much should we assume that students know how to use the AI tools? And it made me wonder about that. And like how much some assignments, I just want them to engage with the tool. And that's actually somewhat the assignment. Like that's the goal. I don't know. So what did you think about when you read that part?
I kind of think the reason that teachers of all levels, K-12 through here, are scared of AI is because they don't really know how it works, like whether they use it or not. And it made me think about the one of the last years I taught in an English classroom as a secondary English teacher. We had a 1-to-1 initiative, which is like one device per student, which is now sort of like the standard, but it was new then. I'm dating myself clearly. And so it made things different because suddenly students had a device and I was expected to instruct them on the device, not like how to use it, but like engage them on the device with all of our activities, right? And I didn't know how to use the apps and the websites. Like these were all brand new to me. Like I'm an English teacher. I know how to teach you how to write. I don't know how to do that. Right. And so it took a lot of vulnerability to be like, I'm going to pick one tool that we're going to play around with. And I'm going to give them like this much entry into it, just like a tiny amount of entry. And then I'm going to let them do it because kids are smart and figure it out. And that was a really good training for me for the AI moment because I know just enough to be dangerous, but I don't know as much as some of our students know. And I know way more than some other students. So I think the problem is we should expect that they know a wide varying amount about AI and have varying comfort levels with it. And then I think we have to let go of some of that like expertise that we require of ourselves, like as faculty members, we're used to being experts in things and we can't be experts in this. And so it feels like a really uncomfortable space.
That made me think I was getting ready for class this morning and I opened up PowerPoint and I was like, I'm so dated that I'm using PowerPoint. But like, I'm like, the students will know I'm old, but like it works and it conveys the information. I'm like, should I open Canva? Like I'm aware there are other tools, but I don't know. That made me think about that. I just went ahead.
I mean, I use intentionally outdated memes to see if they even know what they mean. It's a very fun endeavor. So like you have to be awkward and call it out, and be like, I know that many of you use this every day. Some of you don't use it at all. Like, let's talk about what I expect and what the norms are and where you can get help if you need help for that, that
I guess it's like, I'm aware there's other tools. I know this makes me a dinosaur, but I've got to get some stuff done today. I can't be taking time to learn I've got to write a book. Like I don't have time to learn a new this does the work. Anyway, yeah, it makes sense, like to tell them up front, like I'm aware there's other stuff out there. I got stuff to do today. Other than learning programs that are just going to change in a couple months anyway.
It's a different take on efficiency, right? Like thinking about efficiency through different lenses. Like sometimes using AI is efficient and sometimes like using the thing works is more efficient, which is why some students are like, I don't want to deal with that AI thing. A lot of my students love to write. And so instead they're like, I'm good at it. I like to do it. this is more efficient to me than like this iterative conversation with this robot. So remembering that like students have different frames on like what is considered efficient or like enjoyable for them too.
That's true. Some students hate writing, which hurts my heart. My children, my own sons. My oldest son the other day was just like, I hate writing and I hate reading. And I was just like, we're in our house. I'm looking around like, you see this house and the food that's in your hand while you're saying this? That's all provided by reading and writing. Like that's all, like, you know, my wife was an English major. Like we're all, you're hurting us. Stop talking. But anyway, okay, back to the chapter though. Enough about me. So they talked a lot. One of the things that the authors offered a lot of ways to think about assessment. But one of the things that kept causing me to pause was time limitations. And of course, because every assignment I assign has to be multiplied by the number of times I have to grade it. And so I was thinking about how, do you think that AI has created a greater grading burden or assessment burden for faculty or instructors on campus?
I mean, I definitely think so. If you don't have the luxury of a class of 30 or under where you can just kind of remember what students are writing about and remember their voice, then it requires a lot more checking, like it requires source checking, which I rarely do. I rarely do that. It requires maybe version checking, if a way that you're trying to keep AI out is like comparing versions, and that takes a whole lot of time. I mean, frankly, I'm not willing to engage in that time. I mean, part of this assessment conversation is I am okay with knowing that sometimes I'm going to get taken. Like sometimes they're going to be dishonest, and it also hurts my heart, just like them not liking reading and writing sometimes. But most of them aren't, there's like a good faith effort here. And so I think that helps me think less of like, enforcer and more of like, how can I support this in a way that like doesn't take all of both of our times,
But this makes me think like, what does the writing assignment look like for students now versus before fall 2022? Like how much has changed in how we assess student writing and like the strategies instructors use in the last few years?
I have lots of conversations about this because I think the inclination, a very valid one that I never went away from actually, the inclination is to go back to in-class writing as a way of like, I know the student wrote that. And I use in-class writing every day. My students have their little writer's notebooks and they write in their little books and I collect them every once in a while, That's just the way I know how to teach. That's the way I was taught and that's how we teach. So I've always done that. But, the problem is that inclination to do more in-class writing doesn't do the same thing as a writing process that's over a period of time, that grows, that is longer, right? Like on-demand writing is valuable and does so many good things. Hard to make sure that the iterative writing process is actually being done by students,
That's a good point. So are there ideas on campus that have been particularly good about how to address this question? I'm trying to think for the person listening who is trying to figure out what to do with writing in their classes, or like what should they be thinking about?
I've worked with a few faculty who've done this in different ways. In fact, I just worked with a faculty member in Kaffner over the weekend who was getting her course together at the last minute, as we all are. And we had a really good conversation about like, what do tests do? What do exams and quizzes do? What do they assess? And we discerned in her class, they assess like foundational knowledge, right? They assess the necessary foundational knowledge. Well, she was giving take-home quizzes and the students were using ChatGPT. Right. So she's like, okay, what if I just do one test and I find the most important foundational knowledge? Okay, that's taken care of. What do short papers that are revised over time do? Oh, they help them be metacognitive. They help them apply their learning, right? So if that's the case, maybe those papers shouldn't be what she was using, but rather ones that came after some scenarios they did together in their classroom. So we have some active learning, some scenarios happening in the classroom. That's like a great moment of learning. What if the paper is about that? They're reflecting on that. They're applying beyond that. They're finding some additional sources to support that. So that's one way I think is pretty effective. And I think it deals with two of the problems. The time management problem is that you do it right after the thing in class and they have a little time to think about it and then it's fresh in their mind and they get it done, right? And the second thing is that it's engaging because it's connected to their own lives, like their own future goals, the things that they want to think about and learn. So I think it deals with some of the Sid Dobrin's cheating issues. One other way that I've seen folks do it, there's some professors in the humanities who are like, we're going to do in-class writing every Friday during the labs and discussions. And I'm like, great idea. So they got the little notebooks and they actually sort of mirrored what they want students to do out of class, in class, by practicing on a similar text. And then we looked at the papers together to see what they produced. And it was really interesting that students were mimicking the ways of thinking they learned in class. There was still some AI bits in there, but it was like a sentence or two and not like, here's a paper that AI wrote. So I think scaffolding is the key. Doing a thing a little bit at a time, making some of those scaffolds done in class, connecting to the content, not adding a new thing. I think that's the key.
I mean, so the scaffolding, I think that's in the book as well. So that's reinforcing that. And then also the first idea was you were also making it specific to the course, right? So the students who were following up were writing something that's specific. So the AI isn't as useful because they're reflecting on things that are specific to them and specific on what they did in that course on that activity.
Yes, you've reminded me of some things I wrote in our notes. And that is that the more localized you can make it, like if an architectural studies class has done this for years, focuses on a different building on our campus every semester, then it's very localized, and ChatGPT and AI is not great at that. And the second thing is, I know some nursing faculty that use using Missouri health data, Missouri health legislation, so making sure it's really circumscribed.
Yeah.
All the information loaded in there, but that makes it so that students are engaged and they don't have they need more depth of knowledge than the AI can provide.
Okay, and then related to this, the most exciting thing anybody could ever talk about is rubrics, right? And so the authors talked a lot about how rubrics should probably be adjusted or reimagined in the AI era. And so, I mean, I assume the writing assignments that you're working with people or your own writing assignments have rubrics, right? I mean, have they changed in the last few years as a result of the AI? And if so, how?
You've identified my current soapbox, and I apologize in advance.
All right, I'm ready.
It is antithetical to what we think about rubrics. We think a rubric is an objective measure of writing. Writing is subjective, rubric is objective, because we're trying to make it objective and generalizable across our class. My theory that has been borne out in a few classes is the more objective we try to make writing via a very specific, particular rubric, the more arguing we have about grades, the less objective it becomes. So I have been advocating for making rubrics even wigglier. So wiggly that perhaps it's just like, here's the criteria for proficiency and here's a grade on the paper. And I give lots and lots of feedback on those criteria for proficiency. And my goal is to help students focus on the feedback, which also they talk about in the book, right? The intrinsic motivation of like, I want to get better at this, I want to learn about it. And less about the grade, which is the extrinsic motivator that they talk about in the book. And you know what? Since I've made rubrics wigglier, and this is borne out against colleagues in the J school, actually, someone just did this in your department, in nursing, in some science-based fields, they're like, it does work. There's something about it. Like if we just lean into the subjective nature of grading writing and we focus on feedback, then it feels more justified.
So you're saying we still have rubrics, and in them, there are still categories, but the categories are looser. So there's more room for it to based on what the student's writing about, or based on like the topic or the nature of the thing, it can be flexible. And then you're arguing that you don't lose something when you make it looser, you actually gain something.
Right. So instead of trying to figure out whether it's a 4 or a 3 or a 3 or a 2, I spend that cognitive energy giving feedback on what might make it a 4 or a 3, and then students are responsible for applying that feedback. It makes me think too about how the authors mention if you're going to have authentic assessments or assessments that are practical, that are connected to the real world, then it's going to be harder to make a rubric, right? Because the rubric suddenly can't be this circumscribed thing with little categories you can just tick off. And so I think it's one thing you have to think about. Like if I'm letting my students do an unessay, which is one assignment that I do, based on some work by Paul O'Donnell about 10 years ago, the unessay is literally, you have to produce something that is any format but a traditional academic essay. It can be a podcast, it can be an art piece. I had a student write an original song and then play it in class. It was awesome.
Wow.
And the goal of that is that your piece that you produce, based on the question I give you, like the prompt, has to be only compelling and effective. That's the rubric. And then I kind of describe what compelling is. I describe what effective is. And then it's big enough that it lets them produce anything for those categories. And it admittedly produces a little bit of panic on the front end because students are like, there are no numbers. I don't know what this means. But we talk about it in class, and we do little bits. I show them some examples. I mean, it's just incredible. If they create an artistic piece and then they write an artistic statement about the choices made and how that connects to the novel they're reading or whatever, it's pretty incredible. So I think it's, again, vulnerability, right? Like, you have to be willing to be like, let's see what happens here and see if I can see student thinking and learning. And then sometimes it fails. And I recognize that too.
I will experiment with assignments, but I won't experiment with a whole new class of assignments. I'll pick one thing and be like, this is the variable this semester, and I'm open to change. It may not work out. I might have to drop the grade. It could be a total disaster. But yeah, we have to experiment. The room changes. I teach the same class every semester, but the room changes and the content starts to adjust, and it feels like I have to update my class. And so I don't know there's no rubric for that, I guess, but I just feel like I need to do things. So yeah, we got to experiment. Speaking of experimenting, the authors also suggested having AI write your rubrics. Did you spit out your drink or anything when you read that? Do you see value in asking AI to help us write a rubric?
I mean, I feel bad saying this out loud. AI is actually pretty good at doing the high-level teaching stuff. It's good at writing course objectives. It can produce a syllabus for a media literacy class for future English teachers that's pretty similar to mine. I mean, my activities are way more fun and cooler, of course. But it's a pretty good structure. In fact, I am going to have my future English teachers, rather than write a whole unit plan this year, which is, a lot for them to write, a lot for me, they're going to use AI to produce it, see what it produces, and then use their learning throughout the class to add to it, adjust it, make it better, and then, reflect on that. So we know that teachers, especially secondary teachers, are taking up AI at a lot faster rate than university faculty here. So I think it's pretty good at the teaching stuff, but it produces things which are necessarily general, they're super general. They're not fun. There's no personality. So anything with AI, I think is just a starting point. It doesn't actually make me itch. It doesn't make me twitch.
Okay. What about one step further? And this wasn't suggested in the reading, I don't think. What about having the AI grade the students' work?
I knew you were going to go there. That does make me twitch. That absolutely makes me twitch. I have long said, since fall 2022, I've been like, if AI is producing the writing, why are we doing this thing, And so I have been reading some really good work actually by secondary English teachers. There's a blog I love to follow. And he's like, the contract is all we have left in the writing process. That contract between teacher and student, teacher saying, I need you to do this, student doing the thing, teacher giving feedback. That's kind of all we have left in this world. And so finding ways to cultivate that in really important moments that doesn't overwhelm you. Because I know it takes a lot of time to give feedback on writing. So being very targeted, I think, is key.
Okay. So probably not on having AI assess student writing.
Yeah, I'm a no on that. I mean, but so in a protected system, if it's purpose safe, can AI take your whole class of papers and give you 3 trends that your whole class does well and 3 trends your whole class needs to work on? Absolutely. That class level feedback, I think, is really valuable. I do that when I grade anyway. I'm sure you do too. I keep a little sticky note and I'm like, okay, everyone's messing up on this thing. I want to make sure to tell them about it. And that saves time. So I think that's my key for AI. Anything that's general and a good starting point, I think it's actually pretty useful for, because it takes a lot of brain power to read across 30 or 60 or 85 papers.
Okay. Related to this, the authors had a few other ideas that I cringed on the next 2, but it doesn't mean they're wrong. I just cringe. It seems like I'm cringing a lot. But I'm not in the same space they are, right? They're researchers of education, and I'm not. So I took one class during my doctoral program. That's it. So one was collaboration. So they suggested one way to do assessment in the AI era is human-to-human collaboration. That the idea that if the students are talking to each other, there's learning happening, and that's a way to get around that. But they also talked about human AI collaboration, and that something's different, right? So when humans are talking, both parties theoretically are learning if they're talking about the actual assignment. But if a human's engaging with an AI tool, only one entity theoretically is learning. So is there value? Have you found value in assessment when it comes to human collaboration? And where are you? What do you think about human to AI assessment or engagement?
I agree with your twitching there. I think it's different. Like I think human to human collaboration and human AI collaboration do different things, and absolutely the human to human is more valuable. You know, the problem I have with human AI collaboration, especially with novices who are learning a discipline, is that AI has a really authoritative voice, right? It's like, this is the thing, this is the answer. And students who may not know better because they're learning, they're learning the discipline, that feels very authoritative in a different way than talking with a colleague like you and I are and be like, I don't know about that. Let's look this up. I'm not sure about that. That hedging is like part of learning, and part of assessing learning. So I guess my issue is less with like how much students might learn and more with like, are they going to take up the authoritativeness when it's incorrect or incomplete when they don't have the necessary disciplinary knowledge because they're learning it to push back on that. So you and I can use AI and push back, but they're still developing that learning sometimes,
So it's like a one-way street basically. And that's how my children, my teenage sons use it, right? I'll be like, hey, what is this? I'll just ask a question, or they'll ask a question, and they'll just chat it, and chat will be like, it's this, and that's it. That's the end of it. They don't really question it, and they don't really, it's a media literacy problem. They don't really engage with it. They're just like, yeah, that's the answer. And so whereas if we didn't have the tools, like if it was the 90s again, we would just have to speculate together about what the answer might be because no one knows. Like which state has the most, cows or something, like, I don't know. And we like talk about Wisconsin and Minnesota, like, but now we just chat it. It tells us whether it's right or not. And then we move on. So there's not a discussion that's happening. I really struggle.
That. Sorry, I like that too. There's not a lot of nuance happening. Like I remember I used it over the weekend to help me define historical eras. I was like, when did the Victorian era actually end? Like, I don't know what I was watching. Who knows? And it left out the Victorian era. And I was like, it called it something different, right? Because there's lots of different names for historical eras and we all argue about it. So if I were to Google it, it'd be like, well, some historians say this and some say that. But when chat said it was like, this is it. And I was like, no, wait, what about the Victorian era? Where's that? Oh, you're right. It was in there and it would like redo it. But you have to do that pushing
You have to know there was a Victorian era in order to do it. Yeah. Yeah. Another thing that they said that was interesting that I'm just trying to put these out there, people might find them useful or not, is the idea of flexible deadlines, which is in a journalism school is super cringy for me. But have you, as a result of the AI era, started to be more flexible with your deadlines? And what would you advise instructors to do about this?
I mean, the two-edged sword about flexible deadlines is, in one case, of course we don't all learn at the same rate, of course we don't. Rick Wormelli is an assessment guru in the K-12 world, and he says, like, if I'm assessing you on mowing the lawn, and you don't mow the lawn, I'm not going to be like, oh, you failed. I'm going to be like, the lawn still has to be mowed. Like, go mow the lawn, even if it's a week later. You have teenage boys. You know this argument, right?
I live this, yes.
Right. So he's like, that's one thing. But the other thing is, like, at some point, the lawn has to be mowed because we're going to get cited from the city or we have, a deadline for something. And so I think it's like balancing those two elements of giving students a little more time if they need it, which maybe would keep them away from AI if it's the deadline is an issue, but also recognizing we have there's a place to stop and move on. Otherwise, the learning just becomes busy work. So for me, I'm like, whatever. If I grade your paper in May instead of in January, that's fine. But you didn't learn all the other things you needed to learn along the way because you didn't learn that thing first, So I think I've been trying this thing that some of my colleagues in the vet school use as well, which is a no questions asked extension. So it's a little Google form. And I'm happy to share it with you. Okay. They fill out the little Google form and I'm like, if you fill out this form, you do not have to email me, student of my class of 300. You fill out this little form and you automatically get an extra 5 days or something, whatever I've defined on there. Because the reality is I'm not going to grade all those on the first day anyway. Right. And the reality is, doing that, students still feel like they have to ask, that they have to go to the form and they have to fill out. And so most of them still turn it on time, but the ones that legit needed a little time, it causes so much less stress. And that's been really an easy way for me to like make them flexible without making it a nightmare for all of us.
Huh. That's a very good idea that like easily applied as soon as we figure out how to set up a Google form for our class. Super easy. I think that's something I can do if I actually think about it. They talked about authentic assessments, which I think you covered already when you talked about, getting into essay prompts and other writing-based assessments and how making them authentically I don't want to skip over it because you talk quite a bit about authenticity in the writing. So is there anything we haven't talked about regarding creating assessments that bring out authenticity in the students?
Yeah, I can speak to my colleague Amy Lannon in the campus writing program has done a lot of work with what she calls scenario-based assessments in the STEM classroom. So if you're not using writing as an assessment, using a scenario as an assessment, maybe it's like a case study, that is often used in the clinical fields, or maybe it's like actually doing something, but thinking about like rather than giving them an essay where they just have to regurgitate their knowledge, and you don't want to grade that anyway. What if you could create a scenario where they could demonstrate their knowledge in real time? It's not AI hackable. It could be done maybe in a lab section. And then maybe the writing, if you want some, is the reflection on that. But there's getting lots of traction in the K-12 STEM world. And I think it could be a really useful way for us to reframe what we think about assessments here too.
Your idea made me think is it possible that someone could teach their class at the University of Missouri the same way they did 3 years ago? Or is it would you argue that pretty much every class probably should have changed in light of AI in the last 3 or so years?
I think that they could, but it would be really frustrating, really not satisfying. All the faculty I work with genuinely love teaching. They love being in a room with students. It's so invigorating. That's why, first day of class and there's all this fun, energy here. But what I'm seeing more often is faculty who haven't made some changes because there's so many choices to make, are just increasingly frustrated. And that's no fun, right? Because they're trying to fit a square peg in a round hole because students have changed. And then in the same way, there is value in some of those more traditional ways of learning. There's value in the humanistic close reading essay, and also ChatGPT is really good at writing them.
Yeah.
So there's this balance. I don't know how to tease that out.
Our
Especially online classes, by the way.
Oh my gosh.
The online class question is a question even the experts that are definitely way more expert than me, they can't answer. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know how to answer that either. But some of the learning, most of the learning objectives are probably the same, right? That's the problem. We could argue that a new objective in some courses would be that students gain some AI literacy. I definitely need to think about that in the J school, but I still want to get I have the same goals for my class, but I can't do it the way I used to do it because the AI actually stops the students, because they use it, stops the students from getting the learning objectives. AI is somewhat of a hurdle there. That has to be accounted for, that I didn't have to account for. And it's frustrating and time consuming as well. I don't have more time than I used to.
Right. Less, in fact, we could argue, right?
Yeah.
I ask faculty a lot. In our main faculty workshop, I host a little session that says, what are your learning objectives for your class? And which of those could be learned alongside AI? And which of those must be learned without AI? And so we kind of sort of categorize those. And some people are all of them without AI. I'm great, we can do that too, right? Whatever you value is fine. And then we have to figure out how do we tweak the class to make sure that either we keep students away from AI in whatever ways, in class writing, authentic, fun things, engaging things to do. And in what ways can we bring AI into the class to sort of throw them a bone? And that's really hard. It's also time consuming work at a research institution, so you're always just balancing what you have time and capacity to do.
And I think I have to make a lot of decisions based on that. This has to fit within the box of time I have for teaching, or I will fail in other parts of my job description that also are important to my future.
Which is how students feel too, right?
Yeah.
It has to fit in the time I have for school. Otherwise, I can't work and I don't have food to, money to buy food. Yeah. And so I think we're all making those negotiations. And unfortunately, the media world we live in has made it way too easy to maybe make the wrong choices sometimes,
I want to ask you here at the end a little bit about syllabus statements and how you have communicated to students, or how you're advising faculty to communicate to students about usage of AI in classrooms. Because I run into so many faculty members who are I don't know what to write for my AI statement in my syllabus. And we were both on the committee that suggested we have AI statements and syllabus statements. So what are you telling faculty who need help with this?
The third question is, what do you write in your statement if you can't actually police it and prove it anyway?
Right.
You know, like this is the
Right.
problem. It's not like turn it in paper bank where we can prove it. So I'm advocating this year, I'm trying out my one experiment in my class this year is trying out putting an AI statement on every assignment
Right.
rather than in my syllabus. And in doing that, I'm writing 2 sentences, which has been really great for me to have to articulate this, like why I'm telling you this is the level of AI you get to use. So I might say something like, this assignment is metacognitive and reflective in nature. Absolutely, the learning takes place as you reflect on what you did. So AI is not allowed. Or this one you can use AI for XYZ because the goal is this. And so I think the key is transparency at every step. And I think our students respond to that so well, you know, when you say, I'm just trying this. So I think that's the only suggestions I have.
I think I think being aware of what's unenforceable is important. Again, with the teenage sons, like there's a little bit of Wizard of Oz happening here, like where I don't want them to realize that I actually don't have the power that they might think I have because they just haven't thought it out since they were 8 or whatever. It's the same with the students. I don't want them to say, wait, you can't do this. You don't have the power. So I do try to write my syllabus statement in a way that's like the research, and I mean the book we're talking about too, The Opposite of Cheating, they talk about how ways to advocate to students about AI, and one of them is just, look, I care about you. That's one of the things they listed earlier in the book, is like, show the students you care about them. I care about you and your learning, and that's why I'm asking you not to use it here. But I also have to adjust my assessments to account for the fact that they'd use it. The best quote in this whole book so far was earlier in the book, where they said something like, it is impossible to write academic misconduct out of your class completely, but you can certainly write it into your class. And so I think about that all the time since I read that. And so I keep thinking, how do I limit the misconduct and create assessments that still get my students learning what I really hope they'll learn? So anyway, so syllabus statements, I'm doing the same thing where I'm actually in my syllabus bullet pointing. In my syllabus, just generally, okay, on tests we're doing this, on quizzes, on assignments. And then I say on each assignment, I will provide you clarity about, and I think on my test review sheets, I'll remind them of the policy, because you kind of have to individually pick them up and shake them to get them to learn, which I actually do not touch the students. It's a kind of a rule. But then, so I am experimenting with the assignment clarity, because basically I just say in the syllabus on the exercises in this class, I will give you specific guidelines in each assignment. And some assignments, I totally want them to use it. I'm actually trying a new assignment called My AI Common Law Essay, where they have to write an essay to try to answer a problem only using AI, but it has to be well argued. It has to accomplish certain goals I've given them. And I tell them that this assessment is actually going to be graded by AI too. And I give them the prompt that I'm going to give the AI tool. So I tell them, you can run this through the AI tool and you're probably going to be able to know what grade it would give you. And I tested it during a 5-hour layover in Tampa. I tested it and it seemed pretty good. And I'm telling them I'm not running any other assignments through AI, but just this one, because that's the purpose of the tool, is to create AI literacy for you. And while we're doing that, I want you to reinforce some class concepts. And so I'm saying you're responsible for everything it says, so you need to fact check it. So there's learning there, I hope. And they won't know if it's done a good job. They won't be able to do good queries if they don't understand the course concepts. So it's building on knowledge. I hope that it's like a review exercise. It's a deepening exercise. So it's okay. I don't know. That's my one experiment this semester.
I really love that. I'm excited to hear how that goes. I'm going to just check back in with you later. It goes back to classroom community. I said early on that the only way I know to think about teaching and learning is through this concept of classroom community, because no one wants to learn when it's boring or when they don't like the person teaching them the learning. That's just how humans work. And so I think that transparency goes back to classroom community. And when you talk about it being a reflection, like a modeling and a revision exercise, that's exactly what I'm using my AI statements to be. So if I'm teaching future teachers and I want them to use teacherly voice, then part of me is this is what I do as a teacher. This is who I am as a teacher. And it's part of my practice to think about how I'm communicating to my students. And so I'm hoping that my students who are going to be teachers pick that up as well, because they see how we model things in the classroom. And so perhaps part of the turning away from cheating thing is also thinking about like the situations and the spaces that we've made for students on assignments to either be successful or to be able to shortcut the assignment. And then know that sometimes students are just going to shortcut the assignment. Yeah. It's not our fault.
There's nothing we can do.
They worked too late. They didn't understand. They're not invested in the course. Like you and I also teach courses with majors, right? Yeah. And so I understand that the gen ed courses that have lots of non-majors have a lot of different considerations too.
That's true. In every class, I would argue every single class, no matter the size, is a learning community. At least that's how I view it. So even though I've got a few hundred students in my class, it's probably a bunch of sub-communities, but in that room, there's a tone and a nature of our relationship between the hundreds of students and me. And if I start calling them liars and cheaters, and that creates a distance between us where it's us against them. And I think it's much more effective to approach the AI as I care about you and I want you to learn. So I've made these adjustments to the class, and let's see how they go. Like I'm trying my best, and I really care about your learning. That creates more of a bond between us where we're all working together toward the same thing. And like some of them are just not going to buy it. Some are not going to tune in, but most of them, like you said, most of our students are decent people. They're just trying to make it in the world. So they're more likely to connect with that.
I also think that gives us a chance to rethink about what rigor is. Like when we think about assessment, we have to think about rigor. And the book touches on this idea a few times, right? Without, I think, saying the word rigor. And so then perhaps rigor, if we're thinking about classroom community and we're learning with AI, perhaps rigor isn't like something that's just difficult for students because, humans don't like to do hard things. For the most part, we don't like to do hard things unless we have a little bit of positive feedback as we go throughout, right? That's the PhD process. We did a hard thing and hopefully there was like some good feedback that kept us going. So humans don't like to do hard things. So rigor perhaps is not just like the breadth of knowledge that they're getting, but the depth of knowledge they're getting that is iterative in nature. So if this is the world we're living in, then maybe rigor is working with AI to do the things you said in your class. Maybe rigor is learning one topic really, really deep and being able to represent that learning versus learning a lot of topics superficially. So I think that the age of AI gives us a chance to rethink about what rigor looks like in assessment. Because it's kind of like when calculators came, everyone's always making that comparison. No longer did simple arithmetic matter as much because we could do that, but we need to conceptually understand what's happening beyond that. We need the depth of knowledge that's happening beyond that. And right now, I don't think AI has the depth of knowledge that we can cultivate in our students. So figuring out how to get that in our assessments is the challenge.
I'm afraid we could talk forever, but I think we've covered everything that we needed from the chapter. Is there anything that we left out about assessment or from your expertise that we should finish up the podcast with?
I don't think so. I think understanding that much like Canvas, our learning management system here at Mizzou, is a learning, constantly evolving ecosystem. So is ChatGPT and all other AI tools. So I think that gives us as instructors the space to be like, I'm trying a thing this semester and it may be different next semester. And that helps me feel like, if I fail, it's just a momentary failure of assessment and that we're all learning alongside it. So I guess maybe the idea of we're in a different type of brave new world in teaching and learning is comforting to me.
Yeah, experimenting intentionally on your class, I think is good. Being like irresponsibly absent from evolving your class when you need to, a lack of is bad. So if you experiment and fail, that means you're trying, and you're trying to be a better teacher. You're probably trying to reach your learning objectives. So I would definitely encourage people to do some experimenting, and as a result of AI, or I was doing it. I've been doing that ever since I started teaching. I get bored too. Like I think there's new ways to do this. So anyway, great conversation. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks so much. This was really enjoyable.